By the time I pulled into my driveway that morning, the sun was already coming up over the red hills outside Mesa, and I knew something was wrong before I even shut off the truck. You ever get that feeling in your chest, like the air changes before your brain catches up, like your body notices trouble first? That was me. I just got off a 12-hour night shift at Desert Valley Regional, dead tired, scrubs wrinkled, coffee cold in the cup holder, and I looked over toward the side yard where my wind turbine had stood for 6 years, and there was nothing there. Just busted concrete, dust, and 4 anchor bolts sticking up like broken teeth. My daughter Emma was standing barefoot on the porch in one of my old t-shirts rubbing sleep out of her eyes, and she goes, "Dad, those people took your fan." I remember laughing for half a second because she was 7 and still called it the fan. And then I saw the bright yellow citation zip tied to my front gate, and the laugh disappeared real fast. My name's Nolan Pierce. I'm 38, widowed, nurse, father of 1 little girl who somehow manages to keep our tiny desert place feeling like home, even when life gets messy. The house sits on a little over half an acre my grandfather left me years ago, old ranch style, faded stucco, patched roof, mesquite tree out front that drops pods everywhere. It isn't fancy and I know that, but I love every inch of it. Problem is, 4 years ago they built Silver Crest estates all around me. 53 polished desert villas with stone entryways, resort pools, imported palms, and enough HOA rules to regulate the angle of your patio furniture. They hated my place from day one. Not openly at first. At first it was comments. Little passive-aggressive smiles. Have you considered repainting? Have you thought about updating the roofline? Stuff like that. Then it became violation letters. My gravel wasn't decorative enough. My fence looked rustic. My mailbox didn't match community standards. Which was funny because I wasn't in the community. My property existed before theirs. I didn't sign anything. I owed them exactly nothing. That drove them nuts. The turbine made it worse. It wasn't huge, just tall enough to catch desert wind and offset part of my electric bill. County approved, professionally installed, perfectly legal. Emma liked watching it spin at sunset. Said it looked like the sky had a pinwheel. Silver Crest called it an eyesore. Their HOA president, Victor Hale, especially hated it. Victor was one of those polished suburban guys who somehow always looked like he'd just stepped out of a commercial for expensive golf clubs. White smile, pressed polos, tan that looked professionally maintained. The citation on my gate had his signature at the bottom. Unauthorized exterior structure. Violates updated neighborhood visual harmony standards. Fine, $2,500. Remaining foundation removal required within 10 days. I actually laughed reading it because the nerve was unreal. Then Emma asked if they were going to take our tree next, and suddenly I wasn't laughing anymore. I walked the whole yard. They hadn't just removed the turbine. They tore out wiring and damaged part of the concrete base. They came onto my land while I was working and did it like they owned the place. That part burned. Not because of the money, because they waited until I wasn't there. Emma had been asleep. My elderly neighbor across the road, Mr. Delgado, later told me Victor showed up with contractors and acted like county inspectors. Fast, clean, in and out. I called Victor immediately. He answered like he'd been waiting. "Morning, Nolan." "Calm as ever." I said. "You stepped onto private property and stole county-approved equipment." He goes, "We removed an architectural violation for the benefit of the surrounding homeowners." Like he was discussing lawn maintenance. I said, "You had no authority." He paused and said, "You've been resisting cooperation for years. Consider this a correction." Then he hung up. I stood there sweating in the driveway with dust on my boots and anger climbing up my spine. Emma asked if I was okay. I told her yeah, but truthfully I wasn't. I was furious. Not wild yelling furious. Worse. The kind where you go quiet. I showered, changed clothes, grabbed an old metal file box from the hallway closet, and started digging through my grandfather's paperwork because I remembered him mentioning utility access years back. Never paid attention before. I found tax records, permits, warranty paperwork, and buried under old maps there it was. A utility easement dated 2001 tied to the transformer station sitting behind my detached garage. Small fenced enclosure. Easy to ignore unless you knew what it was. I called my friend Aaron, licensed electrician, smartest stubborn guy I know. He drove over in an hour, looked at the documents, then looked at the fenced transformer, and started grinning like he'd just heard the punchline before I had. "Nolan," he said, Tell me Silvercrest never renewed this. I said, looks expired 2 years ago. He laughed and slapped the fence. Then they've got a real problem, because every one of those houses pulls power through equipment sitting on your land. I stared at him. He pointed toward the neighborhood beyond my backyard wall. Pools, EV chargers, irrigation, clubhouse, all through here. It felt weirdly quiet after that. Wind moving through dry brush. Emma humming inside. Aaron crouched beside the transformer reading capacity labels. And they're overloaded too. I asked what that meant. He stood up and smiled. Means Victor Hale tore out the wrong thing. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just some stubborn guy in an old house getting pushed around by a neighborhood committee. I was standing 10 feet away from the only transformer feeding their luxury development, and legally speaking, they were using it without permission. I looked toward Silvercrest where sprinklers were running and pool pumps hummed and sunlight reflected off windows worth more than my whole place. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel cornered. I felt calm. The kind of calm you get right before somebody learns an expensive lesson. The kind of calm you get right before somebody learns an expensive lesson. Aaron stayed another hour helping me document everything. Transformer serial numbers, load capacity, old easement language, every line feeding Silvercrest, and by the time we were done the desert heat was already pressing down hard enough to shimmer above the gravel. June in Arizona doesn't mess around. It doesn't ask politely. It sits on your shoulders and dares your air conditioner to keep up. I sent a certified letter that afternoon addressed to the HOA board and Victor personally. Kept it simple. Due to expired utility access agreements and documented equipment overload, temporary electrical load reduction would begin immediately for safety and compliance review. That was it. No threats. No attitude. Just facts. Victor called within 20 minutes, sounding amused. You can't be serious. I said, very serious. He laughed. You don't get to control a private subdivision because you found an old file. I leaned back in my chair and said, I don't control it. Victor, physics does. Then I hung up. First thing I shut down was landscape lighting. Nothing essential. Decorative path lights, fountain pumps, clubhouse accent lighting. Just enough to lower strain. By sunset, half the neighborhood looked annoyed. Their perfect palm-lined walkways suddenly dim. The fountain at the front gate went silent. Residents started posting in the HOA group chat. I know because my neighbor Maria from across the wash screenshotted everything. People thought it was a maintenance issue. Victor posted a confident update saying repairs were underway. The next morning Aaron came back with his thermal scanner. We checked the transformer. Running hot. Too hot. Silvercrest had expanded since installation. Bigger clubhouse, more charging stations, more pool equipment. The original system was never designed for that much pull. This thing's carrying way too much, Aaron muttered. Honestly surprised it hasn't tripped already. I shut down the EV charging circuits next. That got attention fast. A white Tesla owner from the north side showed up irritated before lunch. My charger stopped. I pointed toward the transformer and said safety reduction. He asked if Victor knew. I said he did now. By day 3 people were getting uncomfortable. Temperatures hit 111. Pool heaters cut off. Spa pumps dead. Irrigation on reduced cycles. The HOA office sent a legal notice threatening action. Their attorney claimed interference with community operations. My attorney replied with copies of the expired easement and photos of contractors trespassing on my land. That quieted them for exactly 12 hours. Then Victor showed up in person around 4 in the afternoon, wearing sunglasses and fake confidence. He parked his golf cart outside my gate like he was making a statement. Emma was coloring on the porch while I tightened a hinge on the shed. He stepped closer and said, You're escalating this over a decorative turbine. I wiped sweat off my neck and looked at him. You trespassed and destroyed property. He smiled. That turbine lowered property values. I laughed at that. Couldn't help it. Victor, you built 53 luxury houses around land you didn't control, and now you're worried about aesthetics? His jaw tightened. He lowered his voice. Be careful how far you take this. Emma looked up from her coloring book. That did it for me. I stepped between them. You don't threaten me on my property with my kid sitting right there. He adjusted his sunglasses and tried one last move. You think these people will side with you? I said no. I think Arizona will. He left angry. Tires crunching gravel hard enough to spray dust. Emma asked if he was mad. I told her yes. She asked if grown-ups always acted weird when they didn't get their way. I said more than they should. Day 6 was brutal. 113 degrees. Silver Crest looked beautiful from a distance and miserable up close. Landscaping started drying around the edges. Residents hauled portable chargers into town. Clubhouse staff kept complaining online. Victor kept insisting everything was under control. But by then Aaron had confirmed total demand was nearly 20% above transformer capacity. One spike away from failure. I sent another certified notice recommending immediate upgrade and reimbursement for damages. Included itemized costs. New turbine blades, destroyed mounting hardware, installation labor. Total, $11,800. Transformer replacement and modern load capacity upgrade, $22,000. New access agreement prepaid. Victor never responded. Day 8, he did something dumb. He authorized contractors to inspect the transformer without contacting me. Mr. Delgado called me while I was grocery shopping with Emma. Nolan, they're by your fence. I drove back fast. 2 guys in uniforms standing outside the enclosure while Victor pointed at the latch. I walked straight up and asked what they were doing. Victor said, independent inspection. I said, on private utility equipment? One contractor immediately backed up. The other looked uncomfortable. Victor reached for the gate himself, and I said, very calm, touch that lock, and I call the sheriff. He froze. The contractors left. Victor stayed a second longer than he should have, staring at me like he still believed force of personality could bend reality. Then he got back in the cart and rolled off. That night the heat didn't let up. 98 at midnight. Emma asleep. Me sitting outside with iced tea listening to Transformers hum. Thinking about my grandfather. Thinking how he always said, people confuse ownership with control. Around dawn Aaron texted me one word. Hot. We checked readings. Dangerous. I shut down hot water systems to reduce strain. That's when panic hit Silver Crest. Showers cold. Laundry stopped. Pool systems offline. The neighborhood message board exploded. One resident posted pictures of wilting imported palms they'd paid thousands for. Another said her refrigerated medication needed backup cooling. A retired couple knocked on my gate asking what was happening. I explained honestly. They looked stunned. Victor said you were harassing the neighborhood. I handed them copies of the expired easement. The husband read it and just whispered, oh no. Day 10 the forecast jumped to 115. The kind of dry heat that feels like opening an oven door. By 10 that morning the transformer casing was scorching. Aaron looked at the thermal scanner and muttered, it's going. At exactly 10:14 a.m. it happened. Loud metallic pop. Then silence. The entire neighborhood shut down at once. Air conditioning died. Garage doors stopped mid-track. Smart home systems disconnected. Pools quiet. Sprinklers froze. And for one weird second the whole subdivision sounded empty. No humming equipment, no water features, just wind and somebody shouting 3 houses over. Then chaos. Front doors flying open. People standing outside shielding their eyes. Cars trying to leave through gates that wouldn't open automatically. Clubhouse staff panicking. Dogs barking everywhere. By noon it was 118 outside. Houses climbed into the 90s fast. Portable fans useless. One ambulance rolled in for an elderly woman on the east row with heat exhaustion. Then another family packed coolers and evacuated with twin babies. Refrigerators warmed up. Ice melted. Tempers exploded. By mid-afternoon somebody on the HOA board finally demanded documentation. Maria sent me a screenshot of the board group chat, and there it was. Victor admitting in writing that he personally ordered removal of my turbine because community pressure required decisive action. No vote. No board approval. No county notice. Just ego. That changed everything. Residents started turning on him hard. One guy wrote, you gambled our power grid over curb appeal. Another posted photos of my county permit and asked why nobody verified legality. Victor tried blaming me, then the utility company, then contractors, but nobody bought it anymore because they were standing in million-dollar homes sweating through designer shirts while ceiling fans hung useless above them. Around 5:30, I saw a crowd gathering near the clubhouse. Cars lined up. People walking fast. Angry. Sun dropping lower, but heat still brutal. Aaron leaned on the fence beside me and said, think they finally figured it out? I looked toward Silver Crest where Victor was now visibly arguing with residents outside the clubhouse doors, and I said, they're about to. And right as the sky started turning orange, 3 board members and a woman in a navy suit headed straight toward my gate. And right as the sky started turning orange, 3 board members and a woman in a navy suit headed straight toward my gate. Emma was sitting on the porch swing with a popsicle. Aaron had one arm crossed leaning against the fence, and I could feel that strange quiet settle in again, the kind that comes after the storm breaks, and everybody suddenly realizes who actually holds the cards. The woman introduced herself first. "Nolan, I'm Rebecca Lawson. I represent Silver Crest Estates." She looked exhausted, hair coming loose, blazer wrinkled from the heat. Behind her stood the board treasurer and 2 homeowners I recognized from around the neighborhood. Victor wasn't with them. That told me everything before anyone said a word. Rebecca gave a tired little smile and said, "Victor Hale has been removed effective immediately." Aaron quietly let out a breath beside me like he'd been waiting all day to hear that. Rebecca continued, "The board voted. Homeowners confirmed it. We've also documented unauthorized entry onto your property and destruction of equipment." She glanced toward the transformer enclosure and then back at me. "We need power restored as quickly as possible." I nodded once. I figured. One of the homeowners, a guy named Darren I'd only ever exchanged waves with, stepped forward and said, "Look, we should have paid attention sooner. That's on us." And I'll give him credit. He meant it. Nobody came in puffed up anymore. Nobody came talking about aesthetics or neighborhood image. The heat stripped all that nonsense right out of them. Rebecca opened a folder and asked what it would take. I handed her the paperwork Aaron and I had already prepared. Replacement turbine. Labor. Concrete repair. Full transformer upgrade. New legal access agreement. Annual maintenance inspections. Any future infrastructure changes affecting my property required written approval. They read every line while the desert light got softer and porch shadows stretched across the gravel. Darren looked up at the 5-year prepaid easement and gave a low whistle. Rebecca asked, "This is non-negotiable." I said, "Your president already negotiated when he sent contractors onto my land while my daughter was asleep inside." She didn't argue, just nodded. The treasurer actually signed first. Rebecca signed next. Darren signed as witness. Certified check came out of a folder right there on my porch rail. I looked at Aaron. He gave me a small grin and headed for the enclosure. Emma sat up straighter like she knew she was watching something important. Aaron replaced the damaged breaker assembly, reset the system, checked the load twice, then gave me a nod. I flipped the main switch. Half a second later, the subdivision came back to life. First a hum. Then compressors kicked on across 53 houses almost all at once. Pool pumps restarted. Garage doors opened. Sprinklers clicked alive. I heard somebody cheer from 2 streets over. Then another. It echoed all the way across Silver Crest like the whole neighborhood finally took a breath. Rebecca closed the folder and shook my hand. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "this should never have happened." I told her I agreed. They walked back toward the subdivision, and for the first time since construction started years ago, nobody looked at my place like it was a problem that needed fixing. They looked at it like part of the land they should have respected from the beginning. 2 days later, county deputies showed up and spoke with Victor. Criminal trespass, property destruction, formal complaints. He moved out of Silver Crest less than a month later. Heard he listed the house fast and left town before summer ended. Funny how quick confidence disappears when paperwork catches up. The turbine was reinstalled the next week. Emma stood in the yard holding my hand while it spun again for the first time. She smiled and said, "It looks happier now." I laughed and told her maybe it was. Life settled down after that. Silver Crest kept their end of the agreement. The new transformer handled the load fine. Nobody complained about my gravel or my roof or the mesquite tree anymore. Every now and then a neighbor waves while driving past. Darren even brought over lemonade one Saturday and joked that I'm officially the most important utility company in East Mesa. Maybe he wasn't wrong, but here's the part one still think about. Victor never actually cared about aesthetics. Not really. That turbine embarrassed him because it reminded everybody there was one thing in that neighborhood he didn't control. My old house. My little patch of dirt. The thing he couldn't regulate into matching his picture-perfect vision. Some people can't handle that. They'd rather force the world to look right than accept it belongs to somebody else. And honestly, Arizona taught that lesson better than I ever could. So I'm curious what you think. If you were in my place, would you have cut the power when you found out they crossed that line? or would you have handled it differently? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or anybody who thought power gave them the right to ignore basic respect, I'd love to hear your story too.